There are significant challenges that one needs to discuss with an IVF. First and the foremost is success rate. We all know that IVF is not 100% successful. However, I must say that there has been a significant improvement over the past decade with respect to success rates. The time when I was studying reproductive medicine way back in 2008, we used to have a success rate of hardly 20%, which means 80% would not conceive with a transfer. But at present, we have a success rate ranging from 60 to 70% between all age groups. Higher the age, lower the pregnancy rate. We need to remember that the age of the mother or the female age is the most important critical deciding factor for a success of IVF. However, we have to understand that we have improved leaps and bounds, and it would not be far that we'll reach a 100% success rate wherein we can predict who can conceive, who may not conceive, and then accordingly change the protocols. The next and the most important challenge with an IVF is the emotional and financial burden that the patients go through during an IVF. I wouldn't say that there is much physical burden, basically because from the time when it was started to the time where we are now, there are quite a bit of physical challenges that have been overcome. There was a problem called as ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which used to be very common in the early days of IVF, wherein we used to come across conditions wherein the ovaries would balloon up, there would be accumulation of fluid in the abdomen, around the lungs, around the heart, causing significant morbidity for the mother. But however, we have overcome that completely now. Ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome is hardly seen at IVF. We can easily prevent it. So that is out of our way. But however, taking injections, coming to hospitals, getting scanned done, and all these things can add some amount of physical discomfort to the lady. Apart from that, the emotional involvement and the anticipation of the fact that, considering that it's not 100% successful, there will always be some anxiety, some frustration if cycles fail again and again. So these are the factors that we have to keep in mind. Apart from this, of course, the finances. IVF is not a very economical procedure. We need to understand that, yes, there might be a financial strain for the couple. So tackling this in a way that, choosing the best modalities, the best procedures, the best lab, and the best facility for the treatment will help in optimizing the success and also minimize the financial strain on the couple. The third and the most important risk factor is multiple pregnancies. See, for want of a higher pregnancy rate, doctors and patients alike tend to transfer more embryos, because higher the number of embryos we transfer, higher the pregnancy rate. So if we consider 1, 2, 3, obviously 3 embryo transfers possibly will give us a high success rate. But however, we need to understand similarly the risk of multiple pregnancy will go higher. So we should definitely avoid higher order multiples. Humans are okay to carry twin pregnancies, but however, when it is triplets or quadruplets, it can add significant risk to the maternal health, and it's important to avoid those complications. So deciding on how many embryos to transfer, which stage of transfer, whether it is a cleavage stage or a blastocyst stage, all these things are something that couples should keenly discuss with the doctor and then see what are the risks and benefits between higher number versus a single embryo transfer. Transferring a single embryo transfer at blastocyst stage is the best case scenario to achieve a singleton pregnancy. But we need to keep in mind that, repeatedly we can't go ahead with single embryo transfer. So if a lady does not conceive in the first transfer with a single embryo being transferred, she possibly should adopt trying for higher number. I would also suggest that if the embryos have been tested, like if we have already done a pre-implantation genetic testing for aneuploidy and found that the embryo is normal, in such situations, single embryo transfer is the best way to take it forward. One other thing that we as doctors do not have much control on is egg quality, the sperm quality, and the embryo quality, resulting embryo quality. At present, medical science cannot improvise, or rather cannot change the quality of an egg or a sperm. So we need to work with what the couple have, whatever kind of eggs that the lady is forming, and whatever kind of sperms that the man is forming. So gamete quality is something that the embryologist, both the embryologist and the doctor, do not have much control on. However, there are few things that can optimize the quality. For example, a good amount of exercise, being away from smoking and alcohol and anything that can affect the general health of the person, being on a good plant-based diet, meditating and making sure that stress levels are to their minimum. Following all these things will optimize the reproductive health. Similarly, for the doctor, using recombinant drugs, making sure that the trigger is given at the right time, timing of the trigger, the timing of the pickup. These are some of the critical things that can help in improvising the gametes. With respect to sperms, there are some sperm selection techniques that can help in selecting the best of the sperm among the millions that we find in a semen sample, which can actually improvise the outcome of the IVF. But however, having all said all these things, there are times when a lady may form 20 oocytes and there are no embryos. And there are also times when there can be 20 fertilized oocytes and we have 90 to 20 good embryos. So this is a kind of difference that we find across patients. So whenever there is a poor quality performance in an IVF, say egg quality was not optimum or sperm quality was not optimum, it's important to change the lifestyle, to make changes in the things that are modifiable, and at the same time wait for a couple of months and then restart an IVF. In most of the times, things might be different because the batch of eggs also keep changing month on month. However, if it's a heritable problem, if it's a genetic problem, unfortunately at this point of time there is nothing much that we could do to improvise it further. But however, if the blastocysts are developing even at a smaller percentage, say out of 10 fertilized oocytes, a lady starts forming only 1 or 2 embryos. In such situations, it's not all that bad. It's just that the hard work is more. We have to possibly consider repeated stimulations till we achieve an apt number of embryos and then start planning for a transfer. So once we know that the blastocyst is developing, it's just a matter of time. Usually, on an average, in most of women, 50% of the blastocysts are considered to be, or rather found to be normal. And if they are euploid blastocysts, the chances of pregnancy are very high and optimal. Last but not the least challenge that we come across in fertility treatment, especially with IVF, is what we call as recurrent implantation failure. That is, if a lady fails to have a pregnancy, even after 2 embryo transfers, or at least 2 good blastocysts, that is day 5 embryo, then we call it as recurrent implantation failure. And RIF is itself is a very poorly understood topic. There are day in and day out new procedures coming in which might have a role in recurrent implantation failure. With passing time, we'll understand more about this, and there could also be some strategies to correct this. The first and the foremost is pre-implantation genetic testing. Now, what is pre-implantation genetic testing? It is a testing of the embryo prior to implantation. So what we do here is, once the embryo develops, usually we prefer it to be a day 5 embryo. There was a time a couple of years ago when even a cleavage stage embryo, that is a day 3 embryo, used to be biopsied, or rather cells taken for testing. But however, I would strongly recommend not to do it. The best time for doing a pre-implantation genetic testing is once the embryo develops into a 5th day embryo, which is a blastocyst. Now, blastocyst is usually a 100 to 150 celled embryo. It has something called as inner cell mass that forms the baby. It has a trophectoderm that actually circles the inner cell mass and which lands up forming the placenta. Taking a couple of cells from the trophectoderm helps us know whether the embryo is normal or not. Typically, we usually take about 5 to 6 cells from the trophectoderm, quite away from the inner cell mass, hoping that we do not damage the cells that form the baby. Now, testing those 5 cells helps us know if the embryo has normal chromosomes. Now, testing the embryo to know whether it is euploid. Euploid means having the normal number of chromosomes. Helps us know which are the embryos which are normal among a particular lot. So, if a lady or a couple form, say, 10 embryos or 10 blastocysts, we usually suggest testing. So whenever we have more number of embryos, it helps us reducing the time to pregnancy. Testing the embryo and then transferring helps us making sure that we reach pregnancy faster. That's one of the most important advancement that has come in. The first PGTA or testing of embryo happened way back, almost in 2003, 2004. But however, the initial procedures were not that successful because testing the genetic material with a few cells was quite difficult. But now there's a new technology which has come in, which is called as next generation sequencing, or NGS. With NGS, even with the minutest number of cells, we are able to actually find out if the chromosomes of the cells are normal. Now, with the advent of this technology, the testing of embryos has become more simpler. So knowing whether the embryo is euploid helps us achieve a higher pregnancy rate. PGTA has a potential to improve the pregnancy rates by another 10 to 15%. However, we need to remember that even a euploid embryo may fail to implant, and this can happen in a rate of about 30%. So even with the tested and normal embryo, there can be failed implantation. However, the rates of miscarriage can be lower once implantation happens. The other important advancements in IVF are sperm selection techniques. Now, these are relatively new technologies. Clinics across the world tend to choose the one that is suitable for them or suitable to execute or which has worked for them. There are several sperm selection techniques that are now available for us to choose from. To name a few are microfluidics, we have MAX, that is magnetic assisted cell sorting. We have IMSI, that is high magnification checking of the sperm before injecting into the egg or the oocyte. We have PIXI, that is physiological ICSI, that is selecting a sperm based on the physiological attachment of the sperm to hyaluronic acid. Now, these are the several sperm selection techniques that are available. We at Aspire believe in MAX quite a lot because we have found that magnetic assisted cell sorting tends to give us very low DFI after processing. We have conducted 1 or 2 procedures wherein we check the DFI, that is DNA fragmentation index, in the sperm sample before processing, and we check the DFI in the sample after sperm processing with MAX. And we found that the DFI was way too low, or rather near 0% post processing the sperms with magnetic assisted cell sorting. This made us believe that MAX has a value in giving us the most normal sperms in the semen sample that we can use for going ahead with ICSI. What we also need to remember that before any of these procedures or processes become well established as evidence-based, it may take a lot of time, basically because in an IVF, the success rate is dependent on many factors, starting from female age to egg quality to sperm quality, and then there are several factors that can affect the embryo development too. So in the lab, when we are handling the gametes, when we are culturing the embryos, there are a lot of things that can go wrong. So it's extremely important for doctors, care providers, and for couples alike that from their side, whatever can be done to improvise the equality, that is something that couples should focus on. From the clinician side, whatever can be done as the optimum way of stimulation or the initial part of egg preparation is done properly. And eventually, the culture of the embryos, the 5 days of culture that happens in the lab, is the most critical period during which the lab, the equipment, and the personnel who are in the lab take the highest care to make sure that the best outcome is achieved. The other important improvisations in IVF, and which is very recent and not very widely accommodated or implemented, is AI. Now, artificial intelligence is something that is going to be there with all of us, just as it's been in other departments, even in fertility. Artificial intelligence can go from where we can start, like when you start recruiting a person into an IVF, it can actually help us decide which protocol to use, to when to give the HCG for a particular person or a patient, depending on the scan and the blood test. Then selection of the sperm, artificial intelligence also can help us in selecting the best sperm for going ahead with ICSI. And then finally, even when the timing for transfer and selection of the best embryo. So at present, artificial intelligence is coming majorly in selection of embryos. That is, when you upload a picture of a blastocyst, it can help us know what would be the likelihood of implantation of that particular embryo. We still have a long way to go before AI comes in majorly in all other areas of IVF, but it's one important aspect which most likely will get implemented in many of the clinics worldwide.